you're on our website, you see a report that says Gaza, the guy that wrote it was in Gaza.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Clair.
Welcome, my friends, once again to the Lions of Liberty podcast, where we strive to advance the ideas of liberty. This is episode number 178. You can find today's show notes over at lionsofliberty.com/178. Today's show is sponsored by Health Excellence Select, an incredible free market, affordable, legal alternative to your standard Obamacare corporatized insurance. To learn more, head over to lionsofliberty.com/health. My guest today is the editor and founder of The Fifth Column, a website devoted to providing news and commentary from across, or rather outside of, the accepted political spectrum. He is Justin King. Justin, are you ready to roar?
Of course. How's it going?
All right, man. That's what I like to hear. Because if you weren't, it just wouldn't be a very fun time, I'm guessing. Justin, and we'll discuss what you're doing with The Fifth Column in a moment. But first, I want to get my listeners to know you a little bit better. So tell us a bit about yourself. I know you come from a background as a military contractor. So how did you get from there to where you are now, running this really amazing, if I do say so myself, news and commentary site?
Well, I was a military contractor for about 8 years. I did mostly non-governmental work. And at one point, we angered the federal government, and I got my door kicked in. And I kind of realized at that point that I might have better uses for my skills. And that brought me to journalism, because I could shoot a gun and I could shoot a camera. So I started with Digital Journal, which is a small Canadian outlet. I moved to the Anti-Media, and then The Fifth Column.
Wow, let's just take a step back for a second. So can you tell us a little bit more about, I mean, I don't know how much you can detail, maybe legally, but what went on there with that whole incident there with getting your door kicked in? Was that because of something the company you were working for had done? Or, was that something that you were under investigation for? Can you detail that a little bit more?
Well, basically, I worked for a company that did refugee recovery. We got refugees out of bad countries, whether it be Eastern Europe, Central Asia, wherever. We started working in Uzbekistan, and this much is my personal theory. Uzbekistan was a U.S. ally at the time. They were also really, really, really evil to Jewish people. We were getting them out, and we were visited by State Department, and they told us to stop. And I don't know if you've ever met any military contractors, but when you say something like that to them, especially when they've already been paid, you're likely to get, the middle finger, which is what happened. And they showed us. A few weeks later, we all had our doors kicked in and all got arrested.
Wow. So when you are a military contractor in a situation like that, who's hiring you? I mean, because from my perspective, I think military contractor, I think that you're being hired by the U.S. government, but obviously they were adversarial to what you were doing. So what's that whole arrangement there?
Well, there are three kinds of contracting. You've got white contracting, which is what everybody thinks of. Blackwater, companies like that work for the U.S. government and as an arm of the U.S. government. You have black contracting, which is like murder for hire, smuggling drugs, stuff like that. And then you have gray contracting, which is where you're working for a church, a synagogue, a private company, anybody that, raised the money. And that's where I fell in line most of the time, was right there in the middle.
That's so fascinating to me, because I honestly didn't even know what you're describing existed. Because now I'm picturing a church of nuns going out and then having a clandestine meeting with some, guy in dark sunglasses and a flak jacket and handing him a briefcase full of cash to go save some refugees. So it's really intriguing. And maybe, I don't know how far off that is from the reality, probably somewhat, but that's really interesting. So is that the kind of work you primarily did? Sort of that gray area, I guess you might call it?
Yes. Yeah. I did that. I did some bodyguard work, surveillance, that kind of stuff. But the vast majority of it was the gray contracting, working for companies that lasted a year and then got shut down, and, back and forth. And yeah, sometimes it is. I mean, if I understand, I didn't deal with the money, but if I understand correctly, I do believe a synagogue hired us to get the people out of Uzbekistan.
That's really fascinating. So did your arrest in that situation, is that what kind of led you out of that career? Was it impossible for you guys or out of the company or yourself to function once you were under the ire, I guess, of the federal government?
Oh, no. That's actually expected. Most
It's
people,
part of the job.
yeah, most people actually maintain 2 Rolodexes, those people in prison and those people out.
Wow.
Now, I had a job offer 2 weeks after I got out. I had a job offer to go to Seattle and Port doing something. I don't really remember. I turned it down because I was pretty much done with it at that point.
Wow. So did you actually serve time for this then?
Oh, yeah, 3 years.
Wow. Oh my God. So that's got to change you quite a bit. Spending 3 years behind bars, or at least gives you time to think, if nothing else, I would imagine.
Yeah, it definitely made me, I think if anything, it made me even more patient. There's not a lot to do. Luckily, I spent my first little bit in like actual, prisons. But the last couple of years I spent at Montgomery Federal Prison Camp, which if you have to go to prison, I highly recommend it. Tennis courts. I had a dog. There's no fence. It's when people say club fed, that's the place they mean. It was a joke. And most of the people there were the ultra wealthy. Gave me a good view of the disparity justice system.
Oh, yeah, I had a guest on earlier, well, I guess last year now. At this point, Michael Santos, he actually spent 27 years in federal prison. And, that was always what he mentioned, how that was the goal, to get to Club Fed, to get to the camp, because that's where you're not free, obviously, but you're as close to free as you can get while still serving out a prison sentence. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's the Wall Street guys, the guys that have money, the guys that are committing white-collar crimes that get there. But in the meantime, you have all these other extremely nonviolent people that were arrested for drug possession or selling drugs and that kind of thing. It's very difficult for those guys to get in there, even without a violent past, until the very, very, very end of their sentence. And some of those sentences are extremely long, multiple decades, if not for life for some of these guys. So, yeah, it's really a fascinating thing to think about, that even within the prison system, there's places you'd rather be.
Right. There's definitely, one of the things that blew my mind was from the federal government standpoint, I was involved in one of the largest international alien smuggling conspiracies they'd ever busted. And I got pretty much the max sentence I could get, which was like 41 months. Meanwhile, some 19-year-old kid that drove 2 pounds of pot across state lines and had a shotgun in his car is doing 5 years. It's messed up. It really is.
Wow, yeah. So what inspired you to do this then? Instead of going back into contracting, you started this cool-ass website, which really I've come to know through Dan Johnson of the Solutions Institute, as well as Brian Engelman. We're all kind of connected here in some ways, and it really is a very professional-looking website, I would say, and I think the type of reporting and the type of columns there are also sort of on that level. So how are you able to put such a well-oiled machine together?
I have to give a lot of credit to Nick Burnaby over at Anti-Media. I worked when I first made the switch from mainstream to alternative journalism. He kind of took me under his wing, and I watched the way he ran the Anti-Media. The fifth column runs the same way. We just have different content. We focus more on the international side of things and a little bit more in depth. Our article lengths are probably 2 or 3 times what his are. So it's a different demographic. Our readers have a little bit longer of an attention span, I guess. And basically, we did a lot of recruiting to get people. We're one of the few alternative outlets that can say, when we write a report, when you're on our website, you see a report that says Gaza, the guy that wrote it was in Gaza.
Wow.
There's not a lot in the alternative media that can say that. I think that's one of our biggest selling points. And we don't have an ideological bent. You have everybody from anarchists to straight statists to libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, feminists, just about everybody on the site, and we don't try to force a narrative. So I promise you'll see something on there you don't like at some point. Some op-ed will make you angry. But at the same time, this is kind of an experiment in free speech because everybody can get their message out.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so refreshing about it is, and hey, we're guilty of this at Lions of Liberty. We are an organization focused on individual liberty, and that's kind of what we filter everything that we discuss through. And so, yeah, we certainly have an ideological bent, and we don't shy away from it. But, what you seem to get it's one thing to have an ideological organization, and then it's another to have a news organization, but pretend that you're unbiased. Like, a lot of our mainstream outlets, they'll pretend to be, unbiased sources. Meanwhile, if you're paying any attention at all, you can tell there is extreme bias in the way they're reporting all of their news. And it does come from an ideological bent without actually saying that you are. And I think the Fifth Column takes a totally different perspective on that, where there's kind of a news section, which is really ideology free for the most part. And then you have a wide array of columnists that, as far as I can tell, there is zero. I mean, I tried to peg you down going through the website, but you really can't name any sort of ideology that the majority of your content comes from.
No, I mean, the only things that seem to run through all of our journalists is, for the most part, everybody is anti-state to some degree, and then that varies widely. Gun control, everybody seems to be pro-gun. We actually went out and tried to recruit anti-gun people and haven't found anybody that's willing to come on there and face the wrath.
Well, if you believe the statistics that some of these news outlets put out, you would believe that there's so many anti-gun people that it would be almost impossible not to find one. But I guess that's not the case, huh?
No, we really tried. And then the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's another one. We can't find anybody that is pro-Israeli, that is not an arm of the Israeli government, which that is one of the only rules we have, is we don't disseminate government information.
So what about your own personal political beliefs? I mean, I know you don't try to inject that into the Fifth Column at all, but I have to think at some level that it inspires the work you're doing, to put truth out there and to really strive to give people a different perspective. So what element, I guess, of your own beliefs has motivated you to pursue the Fifth Column?
Well, I've been all over the world. The one thing I realized is I never found a person I thought that, we should be at war with. It was always somebody acting out the policy of the government. So I don't like using the word anarchist because it conjures up, Molotov cocktails and throwing rocks at cops in the streets and stuff like that. But that's pretty much where I fall. I think by and large, people just want to be left alone. I think that we could accomplish that, but it takes a lot of self-responsibility that not everybody's willing to exercise.
So would you say you're kind of a non-ideological, sort of libertarian-leaning-ish person then? I'm trying to be as open and vague as possible here, but it sounds that's sort of where you come from.
Yeah, if I had to pick somebody in a political party, the Libertarian Party does come closest to what I believe. In fact, I mean, Adrian Wiley is one of my favorite politicians. So.
And he is, for people that don't know, I believe he is a libertarian that was in Florida that ran for governor. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's absolutely correct.
Phew, because I would have felt really silly trying to pretend I'm an expert on these matters if I didn't know.
That's him. He's the guy that, to protest the Real ID Act, he turned in his driver's license and drove around for 2 years without a driver's license trying to get arrested. I like the way he operates. He's very, I guess, flamboyant at times, but he also gets the point across.
So what some people might be thinking, and there's a few ways that you might come at this from, how'd you get inspired to entitle your project here, your website, The Fifth Column?
Well, there are two reasons. One, the old infiltration thing of basically there was a general approaching a town, and he said, I have a column approaching from the north, south, east, and west, and I already have a fifth column inside the city that's going to open the gates for us. And we are the media's fifth column. We're trying to basically open it up from the inside. And then the other place it comes from is most daily newspapers have 4 columns on the front page. The fifth column is the column that you don't read, the column you don't get to see, the news you don't get to hear.
Aha. So it's a multifaceted meaning here.
Yes.
Well, cool, man. Well, we're going to delve a little bit more into some of the stories that you guys have been covering over at the Fifth Column. But first, we're going to take a minute out to tell everyone a little bit more about our great sponsors over at Health Excellence Select. Because as someone who purchases my own health insurance, I had become extremely frustrated at my escalating premiums and deductibles after the implementation of Obamacare, and this forced me to seek an alternative. And I found that alternative in the concept of health sharing, where groups of like-minded individuals get together to voluntarily cover each other's medical costs. Health Excellence Select will help you take charge of your healthcare without having to deal with all the cost and hassle of handling paperwork and spending hours on the phone with bureaucrats just trying to get paid. They will handle all the dirty work for you while also providing tons of valuable tools to help you stay healthy. Listeners of this program can get the VIP treatment and get signed up directly by my great representative, Jeff Cantor. Give him a call at 440-283-6849. Tell him Mark from Lions of Liberty sent you. Until then, head on over to lionsofliberty.com/health for more information. Just in general, what sort of news stories interest you the most? What's the kind of things that you don't think are being touched on out there nearly enough that you guys try to really put forward at the Fifth Column?
I think that our influence, the U.S. government's influence in the stories you don't hear about, as far as, what's going on in Central Africa, places like this, because they don't seem important today, but in 5 years, understanding what happened today is going to be really important, because Central Africa will become the new Mideast very, very soon. And it's going to be constant conflict. We're going to be there all the time. And I think that people need to understand that, hopefully, before it happens.
And why do you believe that is? Is there is that where a lot of resources that you see kind of different factions warring over in that area? Is it really go back to a lot of the colonialism and imperialism we've seen even over the last century, that a lot of this stuff ends up coming to a head decades and decades later? So what's the direction you come at that from?
Well, yeah, I see basically the Middle East is going to shape up. We're going to see a lot of redrawn borders. And once those borders are redrawn, everything's going to be pretty stable. It's going to be like Europe. Africa is still very much free-for-all. There's a lot of private corporations that employ gray and black contractors to do a lot of dirty stuff in Central Africa. The U.S. military set up basically an Africa command recently to start flexing the U.S.'s muscles there. And even something is, the one story out of Africa everybody remembers is, bring our girls back, the girls in Nigeria that got kidnapped by the Boko Haram.
Right.
Well, the fact is, the Boko Haram took these kids up into, the northeastern part of Nigeria. It's a place that has like 6 roads. We could have used satellite surveillance and given them the exact location of these people within, 3 days. However, we chose not to because we wanted the Nigerian government to invite us in. I think that's the information that people need.
Well, geez, Michelle Obama didn't mention that at all when she was posting her, hashtag bring our girls home stuff. There was nothing about a relationship with the Nigerian government in there.
Yeah, that's, it's stuff like that. And, the fact that, the guy that tried to stage the coup was also the guy we trained. There's a lot of that good, Cold War style, Masters of the Universe intelligence activity that's still going on there that I think people need to know about. Because unlike we see the Middle East as barbaric and genocidal, wait until we get down. It's going to be horrible. I mean, there's a lot of scores to settle on that continent.
What do you mean by scores to settle? Can you delve into that a little bit deeper?
Well, it's more when, when we went down and drew up the borders as Europeans, we didn't really take into account the people that lived there. We used natural borders, rivers and mountain ranges to decide where the lines were. And because of that, we put, groups of several tribes or ethnicities into one country. And eventually one of them took over and subjugated the rest. Those that were subjugated want to get even. A good example of that happening is Rwanda. And I think we're going to see a lot of that when we finally really start pushing it on that continent.
I mean, you have all of these ancient tribes, many of which, have different feuds with each other for various reasons, whether it's culture, religious, what have you. And then when you try to wedge them all into certain areas, or perhaps in some instances divide them artificially based on, basically arbitrary lines, wherever it was convenient to draw them to slice things up, well, it seems to me at least logical that it's going to result in conflict. I guess the people doing this stuff either don't realize it, or perhaps they even can foresee that conflict, and they say, well, great, this is going to really help us. It's going to give us more reasons to be there, because if there's conflict, well, you got to have peacekeepers, right? You got to have the United Nations. You got to have AFRICOM, because without all that conflict going on, you don't have as many excuses for the government and various agencies to be there. Exactly.
A lot of this could be resolved very easily. The situation in Iraq, everybody knew when we went in 2003 that country was going to break up. Anybody that had any knowledge of the region, they were aware that eventually a Kurdistan would emerge, that the Sunnis and the Shias, that everything that happened was going to happen. However, When we went in, we signed contracts with the government in Baghdad. So we need to keep them in power as long as we possibly can. That's what's going on there. If you wanted peace in that region, one of the first things that would have to happen would be Iraq turning into 3 or 4 different countries. And we could do the same thing by recognizing a lot of these separatist groups in Africa, and it would stabilize the country. But stability isn't profitable. So,
yeah, sure. If you've got a shining mecca of a country and there's no issues there, it's very difficult for a president or someone to come on TV and say, "Well, it's very necessary that we send our troops in there." And everybody would say, "Well, what do you mean? There's nothing going on there. What's the problem?" So yeah, I mean, without conflict, how do they justify anything that they might want to do for, I guess, alternative reasons?
Right. And normally the way it operates is we go in to stabilize a country, bring democracy to it, whatever term you want to use. And the guy that we put in power, we basically, negotiate with him. We'll get you in power, but we need Shell to get this contract. We need Halliburton to get this contract. We need, when it gets to Africa, it's going to be mineral companies or logging companies.
So most of these foreign operations that you're discussing here, they really sound like they're basically just giant crony capitalist missions. It's the U.S. government or perhaps other governments acting in concert in order to pave the way for corporations who they may have some sort of relationship with, which I guess is an issue that we often hear candidates discussing. We hear Bernie Sanders always talking about breaking that connection between corporations and government. A lot of libertarians talk about that too, and yet that does seem to indeed be, at least when it comes to foreign policy, the main driving force.
Oh, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, we're interested in Nigeria, and we're talking about a few thousand people getting killed. However, why? Because they're full of natural resources. 1,000 miles away, you have Sudan. I don't know if you've read any of the reports, but oh my God, it's horrible.
It doesn't sound like a fun place to be right now.
Right, but they don't have anything. So whatever, let them kill themselves.
That's why you've got, actors and George Clooney out there begging the U.S. government to intervene in Sudan, and they're like, nah, we're good. Oh, but hey, what's going on over here in Nigeria? Oh, we should probably look into that. And right. Meanwhile, the actual threats, they may vary in legitimacy, and I'm not advocating for intervention in Sudan either, but there isn't really a consistency there on what countries the United States goes to target. There's no consistency in terms of human rights violations and that kind of thing, because if there was, obviously North Korea would have been invaded a long time ago if the main concern was human rights violations, but they don't have a whole lot to give us and a whole lot for us to take from them, so we just kind of pay them off and play a little dance with them.
Right, and if human rights violations were really that important, we always hear about how horrible prisoners are treated anytime they want to sell a war. Well, then we need to invade Mississippi. I mean, there's a lot of double talk. And to me, I find it really interesting.
Justin, I'm wondering if you ever get accused for saying just basic things like you're saying now, things that can be absolutely backed up by facts. I mean, some people might say the conjecture of the connection is too much, but, if you literally see these companies going into these countries the second after the U.S. military gets done invading, I mean, at some point you have to just make a logical connection, but do you ever get accused of just being a conspiracy theorist or anything like that simply for pointing out these connections?
I think because I kind of made my bones as a skeptic on a lot of this stuff, I don't get that shot at me very often. When it comes to most conspiracy theories, I go through and try to debunk them. And that's normally the way I approach it. When I approached our connection to the Islamic State, I didn't go in trying to prove it. I went in trying to debunk it, and then I couldn't. And when you approach something from that manner, you have, okay, well, yeah, not just all the stuff that you know about with the accidental weapons drops and the Toyotas and all of that stuff. But did you know that we actually had Baghdadi in custody since 2006, and we let him go from different prison to prison and recruit?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, neither did I till I started looking into it, because this was one I honestly didn't believe. I thought it was one where maybe we just kind of turned a blind eye and let the Islamic State grow because we knew it would create some red on red fire, bad guys shooting bad guys. But then when I started looking into it, yeah, Baghdadi was in a U.S. prison. He was there a very, very long time, but he was allowed to go between, Abu Ghraib and a lot of the other prisons. He was allowed to go wherever he wanted. And then he got released. He built the core of the Islamic State while he was in U.S. custody, while he was being shuttled around by U.S. intelligence. And then the kicker is when you try to get dates for when he was in custody, DOD will not give them up.
What's their explanation for releasing this guy? Do they just say, oh, well, we didn't know he was going to go start ISIS? I mean, how could we know?
They won't give an explanation for releasing him. They won't say why he was in custody. They won't give the dates he was in custody. We have to piece it all together through interviews from other prisoners and prison guards. But basically, yeah, I mean, we held them and shuttled them around and let them recruit. DOD will not give an answer. And I've tried, CNN's tried, Fox News has tried. Everybody's tried to get this answer. DOD just won't respond.
Because, I mean, when I even imply that the U.S. government may have intentionally, at least at a minimum, I even try to do the sort of white bread version. I say they allowed them to rise, if nothing else. But I mean, it sounds like your research is leading you to an even further conclusion. But even when I say something like that, I'll get eye rolls. I'll get, oh, come on, conspiracy theorist. And it's like, I'm not just making things up. I'm not theorizing. I'm pointing at actual facts that exist that I'm showing you, but you don't want to listen because you already have an idea that, any idea like that must be a conspiracy theory because it's too crazy to think that the U.S. government would actively try to create an organization like that. But your research seems to have, you do believe that it was more of an active role that the U.S. government played in the creation of ISIS then.
Yes, and then the final nail in the straw was basically there was a falling out between the administration and the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the CIA's, super secret little brother. I'm not sure exactly what happened. The rumor mill is that about 50 of their guys got killed on the Iraqi-Syrian border and that the Obama administration denied resources for it or something like that. That's a rumor. The fact is, immediately after this incident occurred or didn't occur, the chief of the DIA walks out. They've released files showing that we actively supported the Salafists. Now, that's the Islamic State for everybody out there that isn't really keeping up in Syria, that we armed them, that we funded them. So it's not even a conspiracy theory anymore. A U.S. intelligence agency has released documents stating that we've supported them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even when we have quote unquote conspiracy facts, like I would describe that as, I mean, there is people conspiring. We have the facts, so it's a fact now. But I think there seems to be some sort of cognitive dissonance with a lot of people. When they get to a certain threshold of something that they just can't fathom being true, they just won't believe it. Even if you give them all the evidence and that you could possibly gather, it just won't be believed because that can never happen. And so they just refuse to believe it. So do you ever encounter anything like that?
All the time. All the time. And the best thing to do is to go to a historical example where you have all of the evidence and it's 50 years removed. So, you can pinpoint it. My favorite one, because it's a story everybody knows, Martin Luther King got the Civil Rights Act passed. That's what's in every history book. It's false. We have the recordings of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and they're talking, and the reason they sent up the Civil Rights Act was because there were a bunch of guys in Montgomery killing cops. That's the reason it happened. There's no debating it. We have the recordings. This is why they submitted it. It had nothing to do with the charismatic region.
But you don't want to say that because it definitely sounds a lot better if this nice, peaceful protester is the reason for change as opposed to the fact that people were out there killing cops. No one really wants to report that as history.
Right. The government you live under is never going to give you the tools to free yourself from them. So.
Well, Justin, I really appreciate your perspective on everything, and I really appreciate in general the overall tone that you get from the Fifth Column because it really is a refreshing news source, and you get a lot of blogs out there that bring fresh aspects to the news and fresh commentary, but you actually are able to do something similar, but really you present it in a very professional way and come across as you are, as far as I'm concerned, as a very legitimate news outlet. So I think you've done really a fantastic work here. I know you're in the process of attempting to expand your operation, and I think you're just tailing down the end of a fundraiser to do so. So why don't you just describe what that fundraiser is and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to grow what you're doing at the Fifth Column.
When we started, we had a 5-year plan. 10 months into it, and we reached the point where we realized we could go ahead and enact some of that stuff for year 4 and year 5. That's a publishing arm, which has already been fully funded. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week radio station, which is almost funded, and it's a internet TV station, along with some other minor projects. Yeah, we're funding that. If you want to check it out, it's #FundTheFifth. Fifth is spelled out. From that, we want to be able to compete with Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, but we want to be able to do it in the guerrilla manner that has made us as successful as we've been, as quickly as we have expanded. We want to continue that. So we want to stay decentralized. This fundraiser will let us do it. We're not in, normally there's that plea during a fundraiser. If you don't give us money, we'll be shut down. No, as far as the website, the fifth column, it's funded for like the next 3 years. We're good to go. But this is to expand and to take it to another level.
And what is that other level? Are you going to expand into, TV production, radio, all that kind of thing?
Yes. We're going to have a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week radio station broadcasting. Wow. And we're going to have an internet TV station eventually that's going to start as a YouTube channel, but it's going to evolve as time goes on. But basically, you're going to have the news desk that you're familiar with on every mainstream network, only instead of, reciting the government press releases, we're going to be giving you actual news. And, there will probably be talk, like little talk show type things, and we're going to do some documentaries as well.
Well, Justin, that's fantastic. I mean, some people might say, this guy talking about competing with Fox News and all these guys, that's ridiculous. But that really is the trend. I mean, the trend is going away from the mainstream, away from these dinosaur networks that are just have been streamed into everyone's house for so many years. People are cutting the cord. People are looking for on-demand, whether it's entertainment, news, what have you. I mean, everything is becoming niched to the point that people don't need to rely on whatever 3 networks happen to be coming into their home. People can actually seek out the best news sources, the places with the best commentary, and it truly seems like that is exactly what you're doing over at the Fifth Column. So I think it's fantastic that you're not just doing what you've been doing, but also expanding your reach, because the more that you can do and the more various mediums you can reach out to, I mean, the more this thing is just going to keep rolling, because, I mean, there's definitely a thirst out there. I think we can all feel it, a thirst for truth, a thirst for honesty and integrity in our media, and for the most part, we haven't gotten it for the last 40 or 50 years, and thankfully now there are people like you out there that are attempting to do just that. So, Justin, before I let you go, I'll let you give one more runaround of how people can find your work. Obviously, they can go to thefifthcolumn.com and how they can get involved with your fundraiser and further support what you can do, and how they can contact you.
Okay. We're at thefifthcolumnnews.com, and that's all spelled out. We're on Facebook, Twitter, all the social media networks that everybody's on. We're on all of them. In most cases, it's Fifth Column News, or the Fifth Column News is the username. If you want to find me, I have a Facebook page, which is Justin King News, or you just find my personal profile. Everybody does anyway, or on Twitter. Pretty easy to get a hold of. I may take a little while to respond, but I always do respond eventually.
And I can attest to that because you responded to me, so it's all true.
There we go.
Justin King, thank you so much for joining me today on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Keep up the great work. Keep on roaring, man.
Thank you. You guys, keep doing what you're doing.
We certainly shall. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed my interview there with the great Justin King from the fifthcolumnnews.com. Guys, when I have somebody like Justin King on the show, it's not just to fill an episode, although, of course, that is a motivation. I do need to have people on here to fill an episode, or else you're just going to hear me talking every single day. And I don't know, maybe that'll be fun. Maybe we'll do that down the road. But for now, I like to keep this conversational. I like to have great conversations, and I knew Justin King was somebody that I could have a great one with. But really, what I want to do is highlight other people out there that are doing some version of what I'm trying to do here. Now, what myself and Justin King are doing are very different in many ways. I mean, I'm here specifically trying to sort of advance a ideology, to advance the ideas of liberty. I want to teach people about the philosophy of liberty, look into how it applies in the real world, and all this fun stuff. And that's certainly one side of things. To me, that's the most important side of things. That's why that's what I focus on. But there's also another problem out there with the information we receive and how it's filtered to us, largely by the mainstream media. What really we should call the dinosaur media, because these companies are dying. Fox News, the CNNs, the MSNBCs of the world, these guys are seeing their ratings drop because people are cutting the cord, people are going to the internet, people have just apps on their Roku or their Apple TV or whatever, and they're finding their news specifically from sources that they trust. They're not just accepting whatever gets pumped into their house through their TV. The world is rapidly changing. We are living in an amazing time where someone with the right motivation and their wits about them can start their own successful online news and commentary organization, as Justin King has at the Fifth Column News. And he really is doing groundbreaking stuff over there. So I really do highly recommend checking it out. And they are a serious news outlet. They get about half the traffic that Glenn Greenwald's Intercept gets. So that's pretty darn good, considering he's only started this, in the last year and a half. So I do highly support you at least checking out thefifthcolumnnews.com, or maybe considering helping Justin King fund The Fifth and expand their operation even further, because without organizations like that, I don't know where to go to find my own news. So that's why I try to send you guys to the places that I use to inform myself. That's why I sent you to Jen Briney over at the Congressional Dish, who does an amazing job keeping an eye on Congress. These are people who all deserve your support, because I need these guys out there to inform me so I can be better informed when I come to you. See how this works? You can, of course, also support us by shopping at our Amazon link, lionsofliberty.com/Amazon, or by using any of our sponsors, libertymaniacs.com. Get a 10% discount by using the code Lions of Liberty. Or, of course, learn more about the great folks over at Health Excellence Select by heading over to lionsofliberty.com/health. And come join the conversation with us. Find us over on Twitter at Lions of Liberty. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Lions of Liberty. And if you really want to get in depth with us, join the conversation, communicate with myself, many of my other Lions of Liberty cohorts, several of my past guests even, then come on over to the Lions of Liberty Forum. That's our private Facebook group. You can just type Lions of Liberty Forum into your Facebook search bar, and you should get right over there. Or, as always, head over to the show notes for this episode over at lionsofliberty.com/178. Later in the week, this coming Wednesday, we're going to have the return, finally, the long-awaited return, the first edition of the new year, of our look at still presidential candidate Rand Paul. That's right, I will have our resident Rand expert, Brian McWilliams, back here for another edition of Rand, Pluses and Minuses. Until then, live long and live free.